Welcome to part 3 of this series where we upgrade my network. And what we're looking at today is the network configuration of the UniFi setup. So if you missed previously, we did the setup where we get it all set up and configured and all connected, and we got it put in the rack. Now in this one, we're going to run through all the network configuration setup. I expect this to be a little bit of a longer video because there is a lot to cover in this and what you would get set up. If there's something specific that I've missed, or something you want to see in a future video, let me know down in the comments below. So let's jump straight into this. The first thing we're going to head to is UniFi devices, where we go ahead and adopt all of them. There's a button just here which says click to adopt, and we can go ahead and click to adopt. It says it can't do that because I've actually already clicked it, so it's doing it one by one. They're all adopting, so we're starting with the USW Pro Max. It's also going to run a firmware update at the same time. So let's complete all of this and we can continue. They are now all fully adopted, and the first thing you sort of want to think about is your network. So we have different types of networks that we can configure. Over the course of this video, you'll hear me talk about VLANs, and I'm just talking about the different segregated networks. Now, this can be as simple or as complex as you want it to be. Just remember, the more layers of complexity you add, the more problems you may face in the future. For a home user, sometimes 1 or 2 networks might be enough, but I'm going to show you how I've set up my network. So we have a default network, which I like to call my management network. So I just do an MGMT. That's MGMT, and then we can give it an IP address. So 10.1.1.1, and we'll give it a /24 subnet mask. And what I do is I go down through some of the settings on here. So we don't need it to be a guest network. We don't want it to be an isolated network, which we'll talk about a little bit later in this video. We are allowing internet access for it. There's no content filtering, but the DHCP server, I want to change the settings a little bit on this. So what I tend to do is allow myself a little bit of a range to set some static IPs. I don't want everything within the DHCP. And if you're not sure what this is something that gives your devices an IP address once you connect to a network. So I'm going to use basically between .2 and .100, I can set a static IP. So let's go ahead and apply that one. If you find that this is grayed out, make sure you turn off the auto scale. Not a big fan of this because it can spiral out of control quite quickly. But if you want to allow, if you have a smaller subnet and you want to allow the auto scale of it, you can go ahead and do that. Now, once we've set up the management network, there's 3 or 4 different networks that I want to set up additionally with this. So I have a guest network. So for anyone that comes around, they can connect to this guest Wi-Fi. I have an IoT network. So for those smart devices, they all sit on one network because they're very chatty and they need to talk straight out to the internet. And I don't want it scanning my existing network. And we'll talk about how we do that when we come to the firewall configurations. We then have my home network where all my devices that I know are secure are going to sit. And then we also have a CCTV network as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to quickly run through and create these. I'll create the first one just so you can see, and then I'm going to create the rest exactly the same. Once you change the IP address of your networks, everything's going to go offline and you're going to be wondering why nothing's working. Well, just reboot all your devices and it will pick up a new DHCP address. So if I go to my devices now, you can see these are all set on the new network. So 10.1.1, and then we're going to give everything a static IP. So let's start with the 24 port. We'll drop down to the settings, IP settings, and then we're going to give it an IP address. So we're going to give this 10.1.1.2. Preferred DNS is 10.1.1. Subnet mask is 255.255.0. Alternate DNS 1.1.1. Gateway is 10.1.1, and we don't need a search suffix at this point. So that's now going to reboot again, pick up a new static IP address, and at the same time we'll go ahead and set up the 16 port as well. So we'll go to settings, static IP. So we'll go 10.1.1.3 and then 10.1.1.1. 255. That's the 16 Pro Max that's now done, so we can apply those. And we can do the same with the Wi-Fi access points as well. So we can go to settings, static. We will come back to all of these settings at a later point, but I'm just setting this up now so you can try and follow along if you are setting up at home as well. So you can see right there, there's all the IP addresses set, 1, 2, 3, and you can do this in order of all your devices. IP them however you wish. Just remember what you've set what IP address to. So let's go back now to the networks. We're now going to go back through and set up all the networks. All the networks are created the same. There's one thing that you need to change within all these networks. So the first one we're going to create is the home network. This can be the secure network or however that all your home general devices that you trust are going to be on. This is going to be a 10.10.10.1, and then we're going to give this a /24 subnet mask. And if we go down to manual, we're going to set the VLAN ID. Now for this, I'm just going to set it as VLAN ID 10. Now the one thing you need to remember, if you have any devices that are on this network, you need to tag the ports within your switch. Depending on what port you are, you're going to want to set the VLAN IDs within them. We'll cover VLANs very shortly. Once we've spoken about the network, we'll explain how those work, how we configure them on a switch port. So the guest network, it's not a guest network, it's not isolated. We want it to have internet traffic. We'll come back and create a content filtering on a different network. So I might set up a separate network for my kids. Again, a little bit later in this video, we'll show how we cover all of that. The DHCP server, I'm doing 10.10.10.50. So not giving myself as many as the other previous devices, but it gives me a bit of playroom if I need to set anything as a static IP. So then we go ahead and click add, and I'm going to do the same with all the rest of my networks. There we have it. There's all my networks set up with everything that I require within here. Now, some people may be tempted to jump into the guest network and tick guest network, but I don't need it at this point because it moves the firewall rules to a completely different area, and we want to be able to control everything. And you'll see with the first rule that we create an inter-VLAN blocking rule, which stops all the communication between the VLANs anyway. So you're kind of doing the same thing. If you want to be able to access other devices on other networks, be sure not to tick the guest network at this point. And if I quickly show you, and if some of you are saying right now, well, I really want to use a guest portal for within your house. If you want to do that, or somewhere in a small business, if that's what you want to do, I'll quickly show you to my guest network right here. You can still select the captive portal. So you don't have to use the guest rules. You can just have it set within the Wi-Fi. Let's move to the Wi-Fi settings now. And I already have Wi-Fi running in this house at the moment. So I'm just going to make a few test networks that we can test on. So the first network we're going to create is IoT test. We'll set a password for it. And then we're going to choose the network we need. So we're going to select IoT because that's our IoT test network. If you want to make any changes to the settings down here, now if you have multiple APs and you want to be able to assign it to certain APs, you can go ahead and do that right here. The hotspot 2.0, we're going to keep it off. We don't want the captive portal. We don't want passpoint. Generally, the IoT network, I would say put it on 2.4 gigahertz only because 99% of the devices that you use are 2.4 gigahertz only. You don't need more Wi-Fi traffic where you are than you generally need. So that's what I would do. But keep an eye out on your devices as there may be a few that support 5 gigahertz. Other than that, we can keep the rest of the settings as they are. And then we can go ahead and add Wi-Fi. And then the other one I'm going to create is the guest network to test this. And then again, we give it a password. And then we can select the guest network. And then same again, you can choose the different types. You can have a captive portal. At this point, you can choose the Wi-Fi band, band steering. Generally, some people tend to turn band steering off and let it do its own thing. So it's entirely up to you if you wish to do that. So we can go ahead and add that Wi-Fi network. And now we have a couple of networks set up at the moment. So let's go ahead now and move on to the next thing, which is probably the main part of it, the firewall. So before I start talking about the firewall rules, let me paint you a little picture as to what's going to be going on the network. So we have 4 different kind of networks that we've made. We've made a main network, we've made a kids network, we've made an IoT network, and a guest network. Now on my main network, I have a computer and a NAS drive, a Western Digital NAS. And on the kids network, I have a Windows machine, which I have right here. So if I bring this across, this is a machine that I'm going to be testing on, and I'll show you all the details of that in just a second. On the IoT network, we're going to have a HomePod Mini and also a printer that we can test printing from all the networks. And also we're going to be testing AirPlay compatibility with using all 3 networks as well. So that's what I'm looking to set up in this scenario. So let's jump in straight and let's get going. At the moment, if I type in here CMD and I put open IP config, you can see I have an IP address of 10.50.50.107. And if I show you my computer right here, you can see I've got on my Mac 10.10.10.201. So they're both definitely on 2 separate networks. And what I'm going to try and do is ping 10.10.10.201. And you can see I'm getting a response from that because the two networks are currently open and they can talk to each other. So I'm going to leave that ping running in the background. And you can see on here on the LAN, you're allowed to talk to any network. So the first thing I'm going to do is stop all the internal IP addresses talking to each other. So we're going to do inter VLAN drop. The action we're going to pick is drop. The protocol is everything. We want everything to drop. Now I've made some port groups already, so I'm going to go ahead and select internal addresses, and I'll show you what they are in just a second. The port group is going to be any because it's everything. And then we're going to go same again. We're going to block any internal addresses. Now what we're saying is any internal addresses to any internal addresses, just drop all traffic. So if I go ahead and add this rule right now, you can see the inter VLAN drop is right there. And if I bring my Windows machine back, you can see now I'm getting a request timed out. So now none of these networks can talk to each other. Okay, so that's the first step of getting everything blocked between. Then the next thing I'm going to do is get set up on the IoT network. So where I am on my main network, I want to be able to browse the IoT network completely. I want to be able to see everything on there, connect to anything that I need to. However, I don't want the IoT network talking back to me. So the way we do that, we can go ahead and create a new firewall rule. And what we're going to do is we're going to do IoT to main, and we're going to drop all the traffic, all the protocols. We're going to go from network, then we're going to go ahead and select our IoT network because that is where the source traffic is going to be. And then the destination is going to be the main network. So anything from source to target, I want it to drop. So we'll go ahead and add that rule. So that is easy, as simple as that. And we can put that above the inter VLAN drop. You have to remember the firewall rules read from top down. So anything that if you had a drop above an allow, it's going to drop it because it's not going to allow it through. And just stepping back about those internal addresses, I'm just going to show you just here while I remember. And you can see these are the three different types of addresses. This is RFC 1918. You can go off and Google that if you want to. They're all the internal IP address ranges, and you can stop it here and take a screenshot if you want to keep that note for later. So going back to the IoT network, we've dropped everything. Now what we want to do is we want to allow anything that comes from the main network to the IoT network, but we need to allow it back through. Now, how do we do that? It's quite simple. So we create a new entry. We're going to do IoT to main established. And then what we do is we accept that. Again, we're going to choose all protocols like we said there. We're going to go ahead and select a network. So again, we're going to do IoT. And then another one, we're going to select main. And then we choose our main network. However, at the bottom right here, we're going to do anything that's established or related. So anything that's come from the main network to the IoT, when it wants to go back through, it needs to either be established or related to the traffic that's come. And then that way we can go ahead and add that rule in, pop it above the main one, and that will allow any established or related traffics coming through. That is a very high level, simple plan of how to get an IoT network set up. Once you've got these two rules, there's one more rule you need to add in, and that is because we've blocked all the traffic in between, we need to go from main to IoT, and we want to allow everything. Again, we can choose the network. This time the source is going to be your main network, and the network is going to be the IoT target. So we're going to add that rule in. We're going to pop that above this so we know it's all there. Let me bring in my terminal, and I can go 10.10.40.1. So I'm just going to ping that gateway, which I can do. And I know there's a device on .2 because I've set one up on there already, and I can ping that as well. So that's also working. Now, of course, we don't want to be doing this for every single network that we want to allow traffic in and out. Now, for the main network, this is fine because this is classed as, I guess, my secure network where it should be able to access whatever I need. However, there is one tool I like to use which gives me a rough idea on what kind of ports I need to open. It's a free tool, it's an open source tool that's been used for many years, and that's something called Nmap. The address I'm going to type in is 10.10.10.2. And this is on the same network as I am, so I know it is on this network and it's going to be reachable. And what this gives me is it tells me all the ports that are being used on that device. So we know there's 80, 111, 139, 443. Now, these are just the ports that are being listened to. If there's any UDP traffic, it's not going to tell me this at this point. And UDP traffic just means it just sends the packets all the way down with no response. But these are the ports that they're being listened on. So I know a rough idea in terms of what sort of ports I need to open. So the next thing I'm going to try and do is I want my kids' network to be able to access this file share. So for me to be able to do that, I need to go and create a new entry. we're going to go to LAN in again, and we're going to say kids to NAS drive. Okay. And we're going to accept. We're going to keep the protocols as TCP at this point because I know the TCP protocols are required. We're going to go from network. So we're going to say anybody on that kids network, IPv4, and then we're going to go to a specific IP address, which I know is 10.10.10.2. And then we're going to do 139,445. That will allow me to get from anywhere on the kids network to this IP address using those two ports. So I go and add that rule in. Again, I'll pop it to the top. And if I now bring back my Windows machine, this is one we had set up earlier. So what I'm going to do here is go to here, map a network drive, type in // 10.10.10.2 /. I don't need a second backslash, so I can sign in with some different credentials because I know I'm going to need them. Now, if at that point you were telling me you've missed a port, you missed a port, you missed a port, so I've left that in there deliberately. I could have just gone back and rectified this, but I left that in there just to show you this as an example. So you have two-way communication with TCP, so it needs to go out and back in again. And we've added in that second rule now. So we had the kids network going to the NAS drive. Now we have the NAS drive going to the kids network. So we're allowing traffic both ways. So let's go back to the computer and try that again. So now we're back to the Explorer window. We can type in, I've already typed in the admin credentials, so we're straight in, and I can go into any of these files now. So we can go into the public folder, we can go into the smartware folder, and we can go into the files folder. So that's another one ticked off the list. So that's now the kids network that can access the shared drive, and we can give them their own login so they can put their files and everything on there. So that's all done. Next, I want to allow the guest network and the kids network to be able to print. So I can already access the printer. So if I go to my system settings on my local machine, you can see if I add a printer or a scanner, just going to pop this up here, it already finds the HP machine, and I can go ahead and press add, and that's going to go ahead and add it. That's because I have access to the IoT network and I've allowed any established or related traffic to come back through. So the printer is very easily added on this. However, if I bring back my Windows machine, if I can type in printers and scanners, and if I go to add device, it's not going to find anything on the network because the traffic has been blocked between them. So it's saying show Wi-Fi direct printers or add a device manually, but we don't want to do that. We want to be able to search it through this. So let's move this out of the way. Let's create our first rule. So we go to create, and we're going to allow kids plus guest. So this is kids plus guest to print allow. So we're going to allow everything from the kids and the guest network. Now I've already created a port group. The port or IP groups are going to be your saviors. So it will save you making multiple rules. We can just go ahead and select that. And then those two networks are selected. Any port group, we're going to select the printer ports. This might vary depending on the type of printer you have or what you're looking to print, but I'll come back to that in just a second. So we then go to IP address 10.10.40.2, and that gives me the printer. Now, just to show you where these are, so these come under profiles and IP groups. We can go ahead and look at the kids and the guest, and we can see those two networks are right there. And then we can look at the printer ports. These are all the ones that I have along here. Yes, I have ATM443, which will allow me to the web console, but I may remove them a little bit later on. So going back to the traffic rules, so we've allowed the kids and the guest to print, and now we need to go back the other way. Now from my testing, the thing that I've seen that's worked for me is the ephemeral ports. So if you don't know what they are, go ahead and Google them, but they are a high number of ports starting at 49,000 and something going all the way to 65,000 and something. If I go and create a new rule again, so let's create entry, and then we're going to do printer to kids plus guest, printer to kids plus guest, and that is going to be allowed. So protocol, we're going to do all. We're going to do IP address, which is 10.10.10.40.2. We're going to click an IP port, so we're going to go kids plus guest, and then this time we're going to use the ephemeral ports. So that's what's going to come back through. So if we go ahead and press add, let's pop this to the top, and then let's go to the Windows machine and test this. So now we go back to printers and scanners, and we click add device, and you can see my HP printer has now popped up. So we can go ahead and click on add device, and that will go off now and talk to the printer, get all the drivers installed, whatever it's required to get up and running. And there you go, just as I was talking, that's now gone ahead and completed. There you go, it's installing. Sorry, it's not just completed just yet, it's gone off and installed, and there we go, now it's completed. So you can see right here, we have an idle printer status, it's all there, we're ready to go with printing from the kids network. So let's go ahead and test the guest. So let me go ahead and show you the phone right here. So I'm joined to the guest network. You can see the guest test that we've set. And if I go to files, if I go ahead and select print, you can see there's no printers selected. But if I go there, you can see the HP LaserJet is right there and I'm able to print directly from my phone as well. So all in all, I can now print from my guest network. I can print from my kids network. I can access the NAS from my kids network. And the only final thing I want to do now is allow me to AirPlay from any device. So whether it would be a guest network, or it would be my main network, or it would be even the kids network. They'll want to be able to AirPlay to any device that's on the IoT network. Currently, I have the HomePod Mini, which is set. So if I quickly show you, if I go back to clients, you can see my HomePod is right here and it's connected to the IoT network. The only thing I am going to do is give it a fixed IP. I'm not able to give it a static IP address. So if we fix the IP just on here, we can go ahead and apply that and it will keep that IP address for that device. For this last one, I'm going to make it really easy and simple, and we have the source and destination on here. So we have the source as the kids and the guest network and the target of the HomePod itself. I've allowed any ports for now just for the ease and the simplicity of this one, because it can get a little bit complicated with the different type of devices. So the HomePod on here, you can see that's one way, and then we've gone back the other way. So from the HomePod to the kids guest. And if I quickly show you just on here, so we have a YouTube video that's being played. If we hit the button at the top where we go, we can see AirPlay and Bluetooth devices. We can see the studio and we have a check mark next to that one. And if I play, and there we go. That is literally that easy to get AirPlay working across your guest network and your kids network. So really easy and simple. These are my basic firewall rules that I've configured on my network. I do have other devices, so I'll probably be here for a lot longer configuring all those individual things. But this gives you a good basic understanding on how to get started. Now, if you want to see the stuff for the CCTV, if there is anything required, that will be in the next part. So if you're not subscribed already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you're notified when the next part comes out. Let's continue on the security theme then. So let's go to general. And this is where you set up the security around your network. Now, the firewall is one aspect of it. There's some other aspects within here. I have done a bit of a deeper dive into 10 security tips that you can set up on your network, where I cover a lot more of this in a bit more detail. So I'll brush over this part fairly quickly, and you can go to that video if you want to see some more info. So in the general, we want device and traffic identification. If you want to restrict any countries from any countries being accessed or any countries actually coming into your network, you can block that here. You can turn on ad blocking if you wish to do so. So you can turn this on for specific networks. You can do that there. And the DNS shield, if you want to turn this on. So what this does is you can basically send your traffic for DNS over HTTPS. However, do keep in mind that this doesn't work for every DNS server. It needs to have this capability enabled. The internal honeypot detects and logs any attacks that happen on your network. So it will sit there as an IP and find any malicious clients on your network. So to do that, you stick it on one of the networks. So we'll give it an IP of 10.1.1.10 and we'll click create, and then that just sits there. And you can create multiple of these. You don't have to have it on that specific network. You can go on here and make it .3, and you can sit one on all your individual networks. So these are my two most important ones. So I'd like to know within this if there is anything that's been compromised. We have intrusion prevention, and we want this in advance. We want it across all the networks. We want notify and block. We'll keep this as high for now. If you get any security detections on them that you want to allow, you can click the add entry button just here and you can pop that in. So we'll apply those changes. If you need to add any port forwarding, now, unless you specifically need this for a service or something that needs to access your network, I would probably not do this. I would use a VPN to connect into your network so you can get to whatever you need to. There are some ACL rules. Now, this can be done on a switch layer rather than doing it at the gateway. It's not something, again, that we have set up on the network. If it's something you want to see a video on, let me know down in the comments below and I can probably put something like that together. And then the final part of security is the firewall and traffic rules. Next, we move on to routing, where we talk about policy-based routing or static routing. So what you can do with these is you can say, I want specific traffic from the management network, for example, to go out of the primary WAN or secondary WAN or however you have it set up. So you can basically shape your traffic however you want that to happen. There's OSPF, which is probably a bit too in depth for this topic right here. DNS, this is my favorite. I already have one host in here already, which is my NAS. If I bring up terminal and then I ping NAS, for example, it gives me the response back for the NAS. So you can use the flat namespace to resolve anything within your network. So for example, if I wanted the home pod, I know that's 10.10.40.123. And then we can go ahead and click add. So I know now if I ping HomePod, I'll be able to get that resolved for me automatically. So a really good feature that you may want to set up on your network so you don't need to constantly worry about IP addresses. Network address translation, this is set out the box, but there is a lot more you can do with this. Again, probably not one for this tutorial, but if you want to see something on this, let me know in the comments. Now, two other areas that I want to cover, there'll be the VPN that we'll have a look at, and I want to have a look at how we set up the kids network. Now, we did cover that in a little bit of detail with the firewall. However, what I'm going to show you is some of the things you can do within the network. So the big one is, again, around security and traffic rules. Instead of the advanced at the top, you go to simple, we create the entry and we'll say kids block social. And what this allows you to do is you can select the type of network you want. So kids, you give it an app group, and then you can say, I want to block all social media. And I don't want it always, but I want to do a custom time between, say, for example, 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. And I want this to happen Monday through to Sunday. So we can add that rule, and you can see now that the kids' social media has been blocked on their specific network. So it doesn't happen on all of them. So this is where you can use this in your favor if you wish to do so. And then you can create some more entries within here where if you want to block an app, an IP, a region, a domain name. Now with the app, you have a full list on here. There's so many different ones on here. It would be good if this is customizable, but it's not. So you just have to sort of tick what you want and what you don't want and create multiple different rules depending on what you require. The other thing you can do also is you can apply a speed limit to your network. So if you wanted to push that to 10 meg, for example, just to slow it down in the evening, you can always do that. And then also, again, you can do a custom schedule should you wish to do so. Again, we'll do this Monday to Friday or Monday to Sunday, and we'll add that rule. And if we select app group, for example, we'll just select all app groups, we'll click save, and then we will add that rule in. Now, when you go back to advanced, you'll see them as a different kind of symbol. So what that is, you'll have a traffic light system, what looks like a traffic light between this, and then your firewall rules, you'll see it like a brick wall. The final thing within your kids network is you can have a Wi-Fi blackout scheduler. So what that does is you can specify specific times that you want that Wi-Fi to be activated, and then you can go ahead and select each block where you wish for it to be paused. You can give it a name and you can adjust the schedule if you want also within here as well. And the last part that I want to show you is the VPN. So as I mentioned earlier, don't open the firewall ports to push things into your network like accessing your NAS or cameras or anything like that. Use yourself a VPN to get onto your network, and it makes it that a little bit easier. So you can use the teleport app. That's really easy, quick and easy way to get access to your network. You can use a link if you want to invite someone to your network within the Wi-Fi Man app. We have a VPN server, so I'm going to set mine up here. So I have an open VPN, give it a port, an IP address. Now, if you want to add in a dynamic DNS, you can go ahead and add it in here, and then that'll obviously update as and when it gets updated. You can create your users. So if I give mine a name of Monty, and then we create the user. And you can create multiple users, or you can go ahead and use your own radius server if you want. And they are down here in the advanced settings. So we have the IP address range. So I'm going to give this a 172.161.1. And then we can go ahead and click add. And that's it. It's as simple as that. Then you can just download the config file, and we can then connect to the VPN itself. That config file then got downloaded, and I've added it into the OpenVPN Connect. So we're now connected over the network, and if I just show you here, I'm going to ping my NAS, as that's what I want to be able to access over the VPN. It's not, I can't get to it for one, but if I ping 10.1.1.1, I can get to the gateway. So we're able to get access to those gateways at this point. So let's jump over to the traffic rules. And just to show you also, if I try and connect to the server, so bring this across as well, connecting to SMB, bring this across again. It's going to try and connect, but basically it's not going to be able to get to it because it can't do anything with it. So let's close that. Let's jump across to the security rules. Let's go across here. And if I show you the firewall rules, if I show you this last one, it says the NAS was blocked because it's being blocked by the inter VLAN drop. So what we need to do is basically open up the NAS settings to allow it to go through to the VPN. So if we go down here, remember what I was saying about the two-way traffic? So we've obviously hit the NAS and the NAS is trying to communicate back, but it's not allowed to do so. So if we go to the firewall rules, security, and we create this rule right here where the NAS is going to talk to the VPN. So the NAS to anything on the VPN subnet, and we can click apply. Let's just activate that rule. So manage. So there we go. We can now get through to that. So we can go now and get from the NAS to the VPN. And now if we bring this across and I do ping 10.10.10.2, you can see I now get a response. The next rule we want to chuck in is anything from your VPN address, so the 172 address, to any of your internal addresses. We want to block those up. So we drop the traffic, VPN subnet, and this. We click apply. Whereas you saw previously, we got a response. This is now going to deny it. And there's one more rule that I've already added in the back, which you'll see just above here, which is the VPN to the NAS. So we want to go LAN out the VPN subnet to the specific IP. So remember, again, the two-way traffic, it was going through before, but we've blocked it off and now we've allowed just that IP address through. So let's go ahead and resume that rule. We click done. And if I bring my terminal back up again, you can see that ping now appears. If I now go and connect to a server and I try this now, it's now prompting me to type in a username and password because it can now get to it. So if we just type details in, you can see the files pop up and I can choose which one I wish to mount. So the VPN is really easy and simple, and you can do this with multiple things. If you have an NVR, you can point it to an NVR. I would lock down the ports if you wish to do so. So if I wanted to actually do this a little bit more granular, I would allow port 139 and 445 because that is the shares that I'm going to be getting to, and that's the ports that they use. So try and lock down via port as much as you can to keep it a lot more restricted. But if you're just getting started and want to make it a little bit easier, use those any rules to allow all protocols until you fully understand, and then you can continue to lock down. That about wraps it all up for the UniFi network. If there's anything I've missed or something you want me to cover in a bit more detail, drop me a comment down below. I've probably lost count the amount of times I've said that, but drop me another comment if you want to tell me how many times I have said it. I hope you found this video useful. Join me in the next part where we look at UniFi Protect. And if there's something specific you want to see, again, let me know down below. For now, this is InsideWire, and I'll see you in the next one.